On the success of that book, subsequently you were asked to write another book, right? Which you
Yes, my editor at
on.
Knopf asked me to do a book,
So,
which I'm currently working on, desperately trying to finish.
But that book, which you're mostly, is mostly done at this point. What is the book that they asked you to write?
My editor wanted a book about the piano, all aspects of the piano, for people who love the piano. Again, a general public book, not a specialist book. And it would involve the creation of the instrument, the players, the music written for it, the social role it has taken over the years, and so on. And it says in my contract it has to be fascinating. Actually, they don't have to accept the book if it's not fascinating.
Even as a professional musician reading the Temperament book, I thought, well, this is a great book for the general public, but it's also great because you uncovered so many things that, I never was taught or learned on my own. And I'm wondering if professional pianists will read and they'll say, oh, I didn't know that, or is there a lot of sort of unique tales? And
that's what I always aim for. I always aim for that. In my teaching as well, that aha moment that Archimedes had in his bathtub, this sudden realization, wow, I didn't think of that. And yes, historically, I keep trying to uncover things that people might not realize. For example, I write about Mozart as the first piano superstar. And in that chapter, I talk about a performance of his D minor concerto at Lincoln Center at the Mozart Festival, and point out that Mozart wouldn't have recognized anything about that setting. Not the piano, not the size of the orchestra, not the size of the hall. And taking people back to Vienna in 1785 when he unveiled that concerto is an interesting exercise. Because, for example, whereas you might have 3,000 people in a hall today, he had about 150 people hearing that concerto for the first time. And he was producing his concerts in Vienna in places like restaurants and halls, where there was food, there was gambling, audiences were very frequently noisy, and in fact the D minor concerto was unveiled in a place called the Flower Pit, and there was gambling going on in the next room, and the piano that he commissioned, especially at this time, which he used at this performance, was a piano that had a pedal board just like an organ. And so when Mozart played the D minor concerto, he didn't just use his hands. He had hands and feet going during the performance. Now, most people don't know these things. They don't recognize that the sound was completely different than what we hear today. And, everything about it, everything about the setting was different. I tend to like to look for connections, even when, as we were saying before, even when they don't seem obvious. And one of those connections that I love to bring out is a connection between these two disparate traditions, which are not really disparate, but people put a wall between them, which is the classical world and the jazz world. They're linked, of course, by improvisation, because all the great pianists historically that we know of were all fabulous improvisers. Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin, Liszt. They were great improvisers and frequently had contests against each other. And Liszt even used to take suggestions from the audience. He left a bowl out at the entrance to the concert so people can drop suggestions in of things they wanted to hear him improvise on. There's some very funny stories about what some of those suggestions were. I mean, in one location, someone dropped in a note that said, the train, the railroad train, because it was a new thing and a great thing. They wanted to hear him improvise on the train. And there was one note that just asked him for advice for the lovelorn, sort of someone popped in a question in the bowl that said, is it better to marry or stay single? And Liszt actually gave an answer from the stage. He said, the one thing I can tell you is whatever choice you make, you will be unhappy. So, but improvisation was always an important aspect of classical music until recent times. I studied with a jazz pianist named Sir Roland Hanna, who was a great pianist who's no longer with us. And when I went to him when I was around 18 years old. When I went to him, one of the things he said to me was, when you go to bed at night, don't take a novel with you, but take a Chopin score to bed. And so for Roland, that connection was always there. It was always major. And what I do is I create marriages. I find pieces from the classical repertoire that share some musical aspect with a piece from the pop or jazz repertoire, and I merge them together. I marry them and improvise on the combinations. And audiences find it kind of interesting and a thing of beauty, I think. So that's one of the things that I do.